The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Christine Orr with Ringgold, and we're going to give a few more folks just a moment or two to log in, and we'll start in just a moment. So thanks for everyone's attention. Hope everyone's got let's see, coffee, maybe even an after work drink. I know we've got folks joining us from multiple time zones today, so thank you for starting or interrupting or ending your day with us. And we too from Ringgold, we're from all the different time zones as well. I'm coming to you from outside of Washington, D.C. I've got our Chief Marketing Officer, Jay Henry, who's out in Portland, Oregon, and also our Product View Manager, Gene Brodall, out in Portland, Oregon, and spanning the globe in the other direction, several of our staff from the UK, Diane Cogan, our VP of Global Sales, and Giselle Rollins, our customer support and marketing manager. So it's really nice to have the whole team here. And we have customers as well as other partners and other folks in the audience. So some of you may know us already. If you're new, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. I think we're going to get started now. Once again, my name's Christine Orr, and I'm the North American sales director for Ringgold. I come out of, just by way of background, I come from the scholarly publishing background. I've been with Ringgold about 6 years. And before that, I worked in publishing, various publishing houses, for-profit, association land for about 20 years. And I knew about Ringgold. I was kind of a fan before I ever joined the company. Like many of you, oh, Jay, yes?
Oh, sorry. I just needed a button. We can't see your screen if you're trying
Oh,
to
you can't see my screen. Well, gosh, let's start. Let's start again. So, as you can tell, we do this all the time, guys. So let me start sharing my screen. Thank you, Jay.
Well,
Here we go.
Much better. That's perfect.
500,000 organizations and counting. So you're all in the right place. You're not in a webinar on, trying to buy Amway products or something else. So, okay, welcome again. Like I was saying, I came out of the institutional sales and licensing side and had heard about Ringgold in its very early days. And obviously the database has grown, applications have changed over those times. So we thought we'd share insights with you and some experience that we've gleaned over the past 15 years. But before I really get going, let me take a moment on the housekeeping front. We are recording the session. We'll be sending links to everyone. And we will also be sending you links to the full slide deck. There are also questions. We're going to take questions at the end, but please ask them as we go along. You'll see a question box on the right of your screen in the GoToWebinar panels. So feel free to populate that and ask your questions as we go along, and we're going to gather them up and answer them at the end. So for just a moment, you've heard my colleague, Jay. So Jay, I'm just going to introduce you for a second. He's our Chief Marketing Officer out in Portland, Oregon, and he wanted to just pop in and say hello.
Well, exactly. I'm here as backup to Christine this morning, just so that I can interrupt with anecdotes at inopportune times for her. And if I pull that off, I'll be happy. But yeah, we're just excited to have everyone on board and to be in a position to talk a little bit about the underpinnings of what we got right when we were considering how to structure our data and build a database that started out with a handful of organizations and is now over 500,000 organizations. And what we did right that might apply to any data project or any data governance initiative. And some of the interesting things that we've learned as we've gone along, and that might help you with your own data projects or any other treatment of a complex data. One of the most interesting things that's come up recently is that we got an alert that many of you may have seen from ALPSP about institutions that may not be real out in the world. And there's a great blog post on this topic that we'll share the link with everyone at the end of the presentation. But what we're seeing here is a screenshot from California South University, which appeared in one of our client subscriber data that we were asked to audit. And it came up about 2 weeks after we got the alert from ALPSP that, this is kind of going on. And we don't really know why institutions are motivated to, create these fake entities or why people are doing this exactly. There's a number of reasons for it, but as we were going through a recent audit, we found California South University. And fascinating instance here, this is not real. this is a completely fake institution. And this is something that we would never have thought of 15 years ago when we started building the database. And yet when we run into this kind of thing, the reasons why it's being created is really irrelevant. What it does do for us, however, is inform our own data structure. And I believe that our production department is currently considering a new type of institution, which is going to be called something like fake universities, but institutions that we're aware of that are not real in the world. And like I say, we'll share the blog post on this, but it's just fascinating. And it turns out that it looks like they may very well be establishing an illegitimate institution for the purpose of buying access to content that they can resell, for providing educational credentials, for visa applications, to sell diplomas, all of these things. So fascinating.
Yeah, I'm thinking like inflating their own scientific reputation and like circular self-citing and things like that, you know, reputation tampering, all kinds of things. So
that's
people are very clever, so and innovative, right?
Really fascinating bit there about the self-citing, and one author has self-cited themselves in their own paper something like 60 times. That's in that blog post. So fascinating.
Totally interesting stuff.
So
we're gonna dig into things like that. It's been a very surprising ride in the past 15 years in Ringgold. So this is what we're gonna cover today. We're gonna give you a little bit of a background for those of you who don't know us or just know a little bit about us. What do we do and why do we do it? Why organizations are critical. That's our jam. Is we stick to our knitting of just understanding the world of organizations that are involved in scholarship and research. Dig into some of the complexities that we've unearthed over the years, and then go a little bit into, you know, kind of lessons learned and looking forward. Okay, so this is a little timeline. Oh yeah, jump in.
Really quickly, I love the graphic on that page because it shows the people, and that's really the point of mentioning the fake university in the first place, is that if we were using purely automated means to go in and create our database and understand institutions and how they relate to one another, we would never have caught that. Some of these are very clever, and it takes a real human being with human intelligence to sit down and look at the data to understand what they're really looking at and categorize it in our database properly.
Oh yeah, our research is like little Sherlock Holmes. It's really fascinating, the things that they
couldn't do it without it.
Yep. And you know, since the very beginning, it's really been a combination of you know, kind of clever people and you know, smart software and systems working together to make you know, what we do a reality and make it meaningful and applicable. And back in the day, the first thing that ever kind of the Ringgold origin story is one of our founders was working together with you know, a colleague at Oxford University Press who really needed to get a good handle on their total market. Who are we selling these journals to? And you'll remember 2003, 2004, this was still primarily, you know, print times. We were just talking about you know, like any of us, and I had this experience too, you kind of eyeball your licensee, your subscriber list and say, gosh, that, you know, that's not spelled right, or is that really that other organization? Or I used to get like very cryptic, you know, PO boxes from like, you know, my subscription agency reps and things like that. And I didn't really have a good handle of, you know, who am I really selling to? I've got, you know, let's say, you know, 5,000 accounts, but that might only be about 4,000 organizations, and I don't really know what they look like. I don't have good demographics. So that was really the purpose for starting, you know, building an authoritative research reference file of organizations, was to take a look at, you know, customers and prospects were the organizations that mattered at the time. And you'll see our general timeline. You know, we launched the company and we launched the organizational database with just tens of thousands of organizations, and it probably seemed really big at the time. Well, we hit 100,000 nearly a decade ago, and now we've hit about 500,000. So clearly, the world's getting more complex. But so have the applications. You know, why are we doing this, and what value do people find in having this clean, structured data? The sales, the prospecting, you know, that operational help of, you know, let's just take care of our customers has been a perennial. That will never go away. So our customers who come to us now, that's still a really clear need for them. But over the years, additional things have kind of snowballed onto that, and we could never predict where some of that was, you know, was going to head. We started to see folks utilize us as a source of enrichment data for master data management. So really, let's layer all of our internal data sources together, our usage, our user population, our prospects, our CRMs, our AMSs. Let's layer all of that together to get a great 360-degree view of our business and our operation. That started, oh gosh, almost 9-10 years ago now. Around 2014, 2015, we started working, people started needing clean author affiliation data, because remember, it's the same places, right? The place you license to is also where the research comes from. People wanted clean author affiliations way upstream in pre-publication workflows. Okay, so we started working with folks like ScholarOne and Aries and Copyright Clearance Center for various reasons to clean that kind of data up. And now we're starting to see the latest evolution or application of what we do, and that is research management and research activity and grant management. We're starting to talk to folks like, for example, the Portuguese government Department of Science and Technology utilizes Ringgold in part to help structure and clean and maintain the national CV service. So any researchers that are like getting a grant from the Portuguese government, active in research, they need to be registered with that system, and the government wants to understand exactly, okay, that person is affiliated with that organization. So we can track and manage that funder and kind of grant activity. So we always say we never know what our customers are going to come up with. We kind of stick to our knitting in creating good, clean data, but our users will find all these groovy applications as we go along. Okay, so I've covered a little bit of this, but what do we generally do? Identify has over the years become the largest reference and enrichment database for organizations in scholarship and research. We also have a couple of ancillary services. We do a deep dive on the crazy world of consortia. Any of you working in licensing will understand that that kind of needs a special tick, and we've actually just hired a brand new consortium directory editor whose focus is full-time on keeping tabs on that shifting landscape. And we also provide some structured data for Scholarly Works via our ProtoView service. Circling back, what we do, kind of our activities are building and maintaining this database, but we help publishers and research organizations kind of clean up and enrich their own records, and that identify databases like the tentpole source. It's like the thing that we map to so that we can normalize those records for them. And as Jay mentioned, we're kind of real people. We don't scrape the internet or just run data through algorithms to clean it up, but we use real people. We have about 25 in-house staff and 40 different country experts. Like I do, many of my colleagues, we come out of scholarly publishing or a research background, or our data governance and data science experts. So we have a really nice mix of domain and technical knowledge to bring to bear to the problem. Okay, and I spent a lot of years at physics and engineering publishers. So I'm always thinking of Richard Fineman, who one of my librarians said to me one time, he's my imaginary boyfriend. But I always think about him in a few different ways. And I love one of this particular quote. You can know all the names of a bird in all the languages of the world, but when you finish, you'll know nothing about the bird. So let's look at the bird and see what it's doing, and that's what counts. I learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. And a lot of times when people think of normalizing their organization data, cleaning up their organization data, they start asking us for a simple list of clean names. And really, the name can only tell you so much, and names are really common. So, so we go beyond that in our research, and let's see what those organizations really look like and why we need to know much more about them. So this is a little slice of Identify. So, what goes into this database, and so how have we unearthed all of this information? Well, when we built it, we learned a few things up front. Again, the names were not that great. Names are not unique. We have about 25 instances of John F. Kennedy High School, and not just in the United States, which is kind of funny. So numbers are a better thing to disambiguate with. There are 2 Northwestern universities in the world, one outside Chicago and one in the Philippines. So the name, not so helpful. Having a number like a social security number, a persistent identifier, is that single data element that tells me, number 1 is not number 2, and it tells me, okay, it's a single data element that can be passed between systems. So that unique number does a couple of different really critical jobs. Then again, we were started by, data scientists and librarians. So when we research organizations, we use about 40 different structured fields of demographic and geographic information, so that we could always describe them consistently. We develop taxonomies. So we've got about 40 different, like I said, about 40 different fields of data for every organization. And on the right there, you can see the kind of basic metadata, additional details that we will fill in. And one of the things we learned along the way, remember, we started out with a couple tens of thousands of organizations. Somewhere around 2012, 2013, we started really hitting a critical mass. You know, we're hitting like 200,000 organizations. We realized our initial taxonomies weren't granular enough. So we developed another layer of classification data for the largest and most commonly utilized sector, which is academia, colleges and universities. So for example, we now have a full structured taxonomy, about an 800 node subject taxonomy, okay? So you can slice and dice even more granularly, okay? And when the database gets bigger and bigger, you're gonna wanna add more things in, so we've been doing that, okay? So another way to think of structured data, for those of you who aren't really on the data side, that's kind of everything in its place, a proper tagged field. So, you know, getting rid of free text as much as possible and structuring things properly. And then the third thing we do in the database is we assemble these organizations, we create the linkages between them. So again, I would like to say, if you or I eyeballed our author data and you saw you had an author from Harvard Medical School and an author from Harvard Business School, you would know they're both from Harvard, but your systems don't know it and they're not really connected. That structure, that infrastructure in the background, that scaffolding isn't there. We make the scaffolding, okay? We assemble them into family trees. And what we're showing here is a sample from the Medical University of Graz in Austria and all of its departments and affiliated clinics and hospitals. And we had a few questions on this prior to the start of the webinar. So I want to address, how do we make these hierarchies? How do we decide who goes together? Okay, we use two rules. One is that there must be a demonstrable administrative tie. You know, this department is part of that university, or there's got to be a financial tie. This company bought that one. Okay, so we don't use loose affiliations. We don't use, oh, this one is accredited by someone else. We have strict rules for how and when we join organizations together. And this consistency and structure, again, is really critical for ensuring data is fit for all the computers that are talking to each other. Okay. Again, why do we do it versus why is this not like a DIY project for something, for a publisher or a research organization? Really, trust. Trust is the big one. Our clients and partners, they want and need to trust their data, and they want to trust that they're making decisions based on evidence and real facts rather than just anecdotes. You know, that was, again, first problem we solved. I need to know with confidence how many unique customers I have and what my market looks like so I can make decisions about it, okay? And it's helpful to kind of outsource this because the job gets a little sticky. They want to trust that, okay, I've got two accounts here. One is for University Paris 4 and the other is the Sorbonne. Oh, wait, Ringgold says those are actually the same organization. And University Paris 4 is just an alternative name. It's an old former name for the Sorbonne. Aha, perfect. So now that we know that, we can, you know, as a publisher, let's say, avoid a potential conflict of editorial interest, okay? One of the issues I used to have all of the time was, since I was working kind of physics and engineering, the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, okay? It's located really close to Stanford University, and they would always try to like hop on the licenses, you know? So it was helpful to know, okay, there really is a firm administrative tie there. It is administered by Stanford University and the US Department of Energy, but guess what? Not actually co-located. It is a few miles away. So all of that stuff is really critical, okay? And we kind of take care of that for clients so that they don't have to, because again, it can get a little sticky. So it's helpful to have someone else kind of looking into this, specialists, okay? So we help folks stay focused on their core competency while we kind of stick to our knitting. And as we all know, one of the changes that we've seen in the past, you know, 10 years is that the research chain has gotten much more connected. We're joined with more systems and more kinds of systems. So if you and your business partners are all speaking the same language, let's say like Orchids for People, it removes confusion and it removes friction for data systems. For any of you who were at the STM Association meeting last week, you may have seen this graphic already. It's their tech trends projections, and so much of this is about connected systems needing to work together, and the emergence of AI and machine learning. Again, more people are dependent on more data, and more systems are involved in our ecosystem. We see more folks hiring business analysts. We see more people pulling in analytics software. People are utilizing data transfers from upstream systems like author support systems, goes right into the peer review. You'll often see, so-and-so is now proud to introduce someone else as a data integration partner, and seamless passing of data. Well, persistent identifiers and structured data are the only way that stuff happens, okay? For example, ScholarOne and Aries both use Ringgold identifiers for author affiliations. They pass them back to the publishers, and they pass them back to the Copyright Clearance Center, specifically for a really great use case that, again, didn't foresee, 15 years ago, to quickly and easily calculate open access APCs. Those are all very complex and discounted, and there are 7 authors on the paper, and you get a waiver because you're from a specific country, and we're splitting the rest of it 6 different ways, and you're from a subscribing institution. So calculating those payments gets very messy very quickly. By accurately identifying which author is with which organization, and does that organization support, is it honored in the business rules of the publisher? If all of those systems are speaking the same language, makes that calculation super seamless. The author never knows about it, but there's a lot going on in the background, okay? And like I said, these persistent identifiers and structured data, it's a solid data foundation. Data and records are kind of the atoms, the building blocks, while the systems and software are kind of the containers. So the better and cleaner and more structured the underlying data, the better all of those dependent systems are going to work together. I do encourage you to follow this link and take a look at some of the work that's been done by this innovations committee over at STM. The tech trends thing is very thought-provoking. And another reason we do it is because a neutral third party has some really specific benefits. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we do sensitive data. We handle sensitive data from our clients, and the ones who ask us for help cleaning up their data. So it's nice to have somebody kind of clean and trustworthy, and we're going to be honoring GDPR, Privacy Shield, all of that. So that is very helpful for our clients. The other thing is it's really nice to have objectivity, to look objectively at every single organization versus how that organization, and remember, organizations are just bunches of people, how anyone at that organization might describe itself. So for example, some of our data is used by publishers to inform licensing and pricing decisions. So if the universities themselves were to self-report to such a database, they might underreport their size. Oh, we're just tiny. Oh, that lab isn't really affiliated. Oh, we only have a few students in this area. I like to joke that all be little community colleges, right? So it's nice to have someone in a third party saying, this is objectively what this place looks like, okay? And for consistency and completeness is also critical. We're classifying organizations in really granular ways with all of that different metadata, and we really couldn't expect someone at each of those 500,000 organizations to report things to the same level of quality and consistency, or even the completeness. They're not always going to self-report at all. This is one of my favorite little swatches. One of my clients has said to me, so Christine, how's the coverage of Indian dental colleges? And I said, well, if they're important to you, I guess we're going to start adding them in. So it turns out we now have 370 Indian dental colleges and schools. And those are organizations, they're really important to our clients, but we can't expect places like that to come in and self-populate and structure themselves properly and all of that. So this is just one of my favorite examples. Okay. So why are organizations important? Again, if we get back to that thought about atoms, they're one of the 3 main entity types that we see in every kind of record or every data set. It's a big organizing principle, okay? It's all we talk a lot about, people, places, and things at Ringgold. And when we combine these entities, we get a full picture of research, scholarship, and publishing. So this is,
And I
one
always like
article.
to, Christine, just to jump in
Yeah.
for a second, I always like to think
Okay.
of those as the main dimensions of data, the people, faces, and things, and that's why each of those tend to have their own persistent identifier. Okay, so people are identified, in the United States with Social Security number, for example. DOIs and ISSNs, ISBNs are used
Yep.
to identify things, the publications, and ISNI or Ringgold IDs or other IDs are used to identify places. Though that's one of the things that we learned is that those three critical dimensions to describe our universe, of scholarly communications, are the main entities that need to be uniquely identified because they all relate to one another, and they tend to be the focus of analysis, meaning I want to know something about an institution. What do I want to know? I want to know about its people and its things. I want to know something about this particular journal. What do I want to know? I want to know about its authors and its subscribers, the institutional subscribers, this kind of thing. And having the right identifiers associated with the right data entities is the way that you can rotate around the data model and have a deeper understanding.
Yeah, and pivot that for analytics and get that 360 view. And what I've done here, this is just one article, right? So you can imagine how much it explodes. We know that research is ever expanding and research output is ever increasing, but this is just one article. And I've tried to circle all the organizational entities I could find. I'm certain I missed a few. We've got the publisher, we've got Ringgold, of course, and we've got the funders. We've got other organizations that the authors are involved with. We've got, Crossref and Medline, other organizations involved in the scholarly supply chain, the editor-in-chief's affiliation, that kind of thing. What I didn't do was also, you can look at how many people and how many things and how many different persistent identifiers are affiliated with this one single article. So it's really critical. Okay. Now we're going to jump into kind of, okay, why are they complicated? How are the things that we've kind of learned over the past 15 years, or what our clients have started to learn? And what we very often get, there's just a couple thousand universities. I just need a list of like ARLs, or just a need of the list of who's on Times Higher Ed. But the minute we scratch the surface, we realize as a publisher or a granting organization or an association, a scholarly association, we all have a very long tail. They may extend out in different directions. If you're a medical publisher, you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies and hospitals and biotech labs and things like that. So it's not really just universities. And what I've thrown up here is just a quick pie chart of what our database really looks like. As you can see, 27% is academic. Okay, that's the biggest single slice, but it's not that big. Okay, it's not as though there's many more that you'd think of. Corporate's the second biggest. Really explodes out pretty quickly. And we all deal, research is global, so we have to cover the world. So it's really interesting. We just actually added a few organizations in Antarctica, if you can believe that. So McMurdo Station. So things are pretty global. So you'll notice that the total percentage of records in the mature markets, if you see the records by region, is higher. The reason we see that is because more organizations are involved, and they're involved at a more granular level. For example, licensing has historically been kind of decentralized in the West. So like the engineering school might license that content, right? Or the physics department or the med school and things like that. So the authors are affiliating at different levels. So those regions have bigger, deeper hierarchies sometimes, okay? Whereas in contrast, in China, a lot of the licensing happens very much at the top level. So sometimes we won't see as granular a hierarchy. And remember, these numbers really represent unique Ringgold IDs, unique Ringgold records, okay? But as authorship and departmental affiliations become more critical, we really expect those new nodes to fill out, and we'll grow the hierarchies to reflect that, okay? And just a quick statistic, university, there's more of them than you think even. I did a quick search before I popped on here today, and in our database we hold nearly 82,000 top-level organizations for all manner of organizations involved in teaching, from graduate and professional going down to primary and vo-tech. And if we isolate only higher ed and graduate, it's still like 31,500. So then, so there's a lot of market out there, and there's a lot of organizations involved in research. Okay. And one more complicating factor, even organizations you think you know are really complex. We all in this, everyone on the webinar is probably working with Harvard or some node of Harvard in some way. So I wanted to just show you what that looked like in our database. So what we have here is the Harvard hierarchy, and I really haven't even shown it all. There are 288 records in the complete Identify Harvard hierarchy. Every one of them has a full record like this, so we do a lot of research to add all of those metadata elements in. But you can just see, and it keeps going and going. And I cut it off at 5 screens. I thought that was enough. So, but it is fascinating. The University of California structure is fantastic, and oh gosh, the U.S. government one, of course, that'll just like blow your mind. So very cool. Those hierarchies are really where it's at. It's pretty interesting. And they add to a lot of complexity. And as you'll see in a few of the slides I'm about to go into, sometimes those hierarchies manifest in really interesting ways, because what we're trying to do is show what the place really looks like. We get that they're complicated. And so one of the things that you'll see that we do in the database is some, just like families, I like to say hierarchies of organizations are quite complex. So we will see organizations, we call them multis, where one organization, I used that Stanford Linear Accelerator Center example earlier, it is administered by both Stanford and the US Department of Energy. So it has multiple parents. So that's just the reality, but we want to present that so that people can actually make their business decisions or drive their analytics based on the right branch of the tree. But if the tree's really complicated, we are going to show you that. Okay, and that takes time to kind of dig into. But now we're going to take a little tour. So as we mentioned, scholarship and research are global. So I thought it would be good to take a look at some general global trends. And in speaking with our research team, we found a few things that were pretty interesting. Over time, we've seen organizations kind of structure themselves in new and different ways. For example, Qatar hosts tons of campuses of international universities like Georgetown, University of Calgary. So established universities in the West were partnering with a lot of like Middle Eastern countries to build international campuses. That was a real trend for a while. I've noticed we are not building quite as many new records for those international campuses, so maybe the actual expansion has kind of slowed a little bit. One other thing we've seen, a lot of organizations are going virtual, which is kind of, our lead researcher says, that's annoying. We love an address, but I could see that having licensing implications. A lot of us still work on kind of, single site, or we like to know what country, is this a multinational organization? That's kind of a tricky thing. So we encompass that kind of stuff, but it is quite difficult, and it creates some challenges for folks. One other thing that we're seeing is, if you think of consortia, there are kind of organizations that have come together to, let's see, collectively purchase, academic resources and things like that. But we're seeing new styles of network cooperation emerging. So, for example, academic and non-academic organizations coming together, and including like nonprofits and corporations, are building quote unquote consortia for the purposes of different and new kinds of cooperation. One example I'll throw out is the Open Research Funders Group, which is a group of about a dozen organizations, mainly funders, who work a lot in biotech, a lot in other areas, but they are very passionate and they are committed to helping to build infrastructure and advocate for open research to kind of drive discovery even more quickly. So we're seeing more of these kind of things bubble up. Okay. And now I want to take a little tour around the world. So Japan is a really interesting example of how the real world, changes in the real world, is affecting organizations. And I'm not sure if anyone has heard of this, but it's called the year 2018 problem. So I guess we're right in the middle of it, or Japan is right in the middle of it. The number of 18-year-olds will constantly start decreasing in Japan in 2018, this year. They're a super aging society. About 28% of the total population is 65 and older. This has dramatically affected universities and colleges in the higher ed market. In short, more health, less humanities is what we see. How this affects Ringgold, of course, how we classify the subjects and add those subject nodes in, but there's also been an emergence of new nursing schools, nursing colleges. There are about 750 colleges and universities in Japan. A third of them now provide nursing education. We've also seen a dramatic increase in the rise of other allied health professions like occupational therapies, dietitians, medical technologies, radiography are becoming much more popular and necessary. And there's more universities and colleges providing relevant degree courses. One of the other things we're seeing is, like I said, they're declining in offering humanities and social sciences. There are about 60 national universities in Japan, national level universities. 26, almost half of them, confirm that they're going to be closing or scaling back these particular faculties. Okay. And thirdly, there's just not enough kids going to school. Since 2010, some of the private universities and colleges have gone bankrupt. They could not attract enough number of students. There'll be more of these cases in the coming years. So we keep an eye on this situation and we update our records to reflect it. This is actually a trend that is being experienced in other countries in Asia, South Korea, Taiwan, China, the one-child policy, clearly. So there will be some consolidation and a lot of change in the university and higher ed market, and it's something that our researchers just really need to be aware of. Okay. Oops, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Although France, everyone's favorite confusing place. India, one of the things that is a real challenge for us in India is the hierarchies. This is like the name of the game here, is keeping an eye on those hierarchies. And there are two things that our researchers see that they need to be mindful of and that they specialize in watching for. There are a lot of times you will see a small college or university, small regional college, that if you look at their website, it says, oh, we're affiliated with so-and-so. What that really means, so you think, oh, are they part of their licensing arrangement, or are those authors affiliated? What's going on there? But what that means is they are sometimes accredited by a larger local university, which makes untangling these relationships a little bit tricky. Most often they are not really related in the same hierarchy according to Ringgold policy. So that's something we have to be watching for. They also, in India, we see the emergence of many small subject-specific schools. Remember the dental colleges? So we see a lot of that kind of stuff. Many times those small schools are not actually affiliated or run by the local education ministry. They are affiliated by a charity, a nonprofit organization. So again, makes those hierarchies a little interesting. And the other thing is that happens once a bunch of them will kind of pop up in the same area. If we get a cluster of these going, sometimes they will eventually merge into a university. Oh, we've got 7 or 8 faculties going here. All right, let's pool our resources and tie together administratively. So again, that will create a merger, which again requires we monitor the sector. So again, hierarchies are like the name of the game in India. Actually, they're kind of the name of the game in France too. Get to that in a second. One of the things that we watch for, and I will tell you, when partners and clients come to us, France is always like where they're like, what's going on in France? We don't get it. One of the not even smaller things that happened, France actually realigned and consolidated their administrative regions like state or Länder in 2016 and reduced them from 27 to 18. And what that meant was we had to update all of our geographic information to the new structure, all our kind of location information. And one of the biggest things to know about France is that it's a highly centralized country. The national government in Paris runs a lot. It's a very, very, centralized federalist country. So you get these public research agencies, INSERM, CNRS, or ones that kind of come up a lot. They are called EPST. That's the acronym. I will not attempt to speak French, but they're public science and technology institutions. They're funded by the national government in conjunction with the French Ministry of Education. What that means is they're responsible for funding the universities, and there's a lot of cooperation. So a lot of research units of these various agencies, like, the health or the nuclear science or basic research, are funding the universities. So there's a lot of cooperation, and a lot of these research units are run as joint units. So in France, we see a huge number of multi-parents. We classify them as like government research units, and even if they're in cooperation with universities. You'll also see a lot of, so where you see a lot of multis, you also see a lot of co-location. So some of these big nonprofit bodies will have regional institutes on a campus with a university. So it's sitting there, the lab is there, or the research unit is there, but they're not really affiliated. It's just like a real estate thing. So we see co-location, but according to Ringgold, they wouldn't actually be part of the same hierarchy. So that has been useful for clients in licensing and things like that. Are these guys really part of the license? Well, if you're licensing a certain kind of content, you might not care. But if you're licensing, let's say, basic science, where that lab could actually be a separate client, of course you care about it. So, but we want to present it so that people can really make those decisions. One that gets brought all the time is INSERM, so we can kind of take a look at that. I'm going to kind of go through this because we've explained it already. But this is what their hierarchy looks like, and you'll see all these dotted lines. That means they're all multis, so it's really crazy. We also see a lot of multis in the health sector. University hospitals are often tied to universities and health systems. We see an awful lot of that. How are they changing over time? How do organizations change over time? Name change, really, really simple. Happens all the time, but if it's the same organization, if it's the same administration, we reassign, we make a former name, and you can actually see in these. Oh, I'm moving my mouse like you're all here in my office with me. Sorry, I get used to this virtual presentation style. You'll see under Nottingham College on the right there, it has a couple of former names. It used to be known as Arnold and Carleton College, Basford Hall College of Further Education. And so we maintain the ID, right? It's like changing your name when you get married. You keep your same social security number, so it's still you, but your official name that you're known as may have changed. We also maintain those former domain names, former sites, because again, that may be present in some of our clients' data, like an email address domain or something. So it's still, you want to see also, that's what those former names always work as. It's like a see also to get you to the right current organization. We will also see a lot of acquisitions and mergers, very common in the corporate world. So you'll see this representation from Pfizer, where all of these acquisitions, and we have also started to include the dates because that's pretty critical. When did that acquisition take place? Again, has implications for lots of things. Okay. So we actually churn through, we respond to change in two different ways. One, reactive and proactive. Reactive, when something really changes in the world, when Pfizer really buys something new, we will update that hierarchy. We also do kind of proactive curation. Just, when it's after a record has not been touched for a certain amount of time, it automatically comes to the top of batting order, and we take a fresh look at the whole thing top to bottom as well. So we're always trying to keep this current because currency is critical here. Okay. So
just had a quick question, Christine, about keeping the mergers. Do we keep the mergers is the question.
Do we keep the merger? I believe the way it's handled is that we, as you can see from the, let's see, in the Nottingham College, we keep the merger with the date, and it becomes the old organization that was merged and subsumed in is an alternate name. But sometimes there's an acquisition, right? And then it might become a subsidiary. Pfizer bought, Christine Orr's School of Cookie Baking outside of Washington, D.C., but it's still run as its own business unit. I now become a subsidiary of Pfizer. Okay, still have my own name, still have my own record, but I'm now part of that tree. So handle it that way. So
and we had another quick question that came in from Wayne Lee about how we chase or how we can track the changes over time, about the history of changes to any given Ringgold ID. And that's a great question.
It is great, and it's something.
Answer.
Oh, I was just saying, we've learned over the years that the history. When we first started out, the database was really, it's a snapshot. It's what the world looks like now. But now that we're getting long in the tooth, we realized several years ago, we need to start having a temporal dimension to the database. So there are several types in our taxonomy that are utilized for ceased or dissolved organizations. If something, we also never throw out a Ringgold ID, so that if you had a Ringgold ID for something that has ceased or terminated, it's never a dead end in the database. We'll point you to the right place. Oh, that company doesn't exist anymore, but now it's a business unit of Pfizer. Let's keep picking on Pfizer. We'll get you to the right. So we don't want to leave dead ends in people's data. So that's one of our principles as to how we handle those.
That's right, and it's emerged when after into our group, but over time, as we've learned how things change, as Christine alluded to, we've been learning as we go with the how things change in the marketplace. We don't leave any dead ends, and we properly reference things and change their names, but we've not captured and kept the temporal dimension associated with the record, and that's something under consideration right now. We actually have time-stamped timestamps in the background, you know, in the big iron that is identify in the background. We know every time a record's even looked at or reviewed or touched, or was it updated or not? Was it looked at and it was fine and not? We have timestamps for all of those kinds of things, but we haven't displayed them or made them available to our customers yet. And right now, we're actually working with our data governance manager to talk about which of these time dimensions should we be capturing, and what can we do in terms of painting a history, as you ask in your question, of a Ringgold record, so we can see it's been touched 25 times in the last 15 years or whatever. That's something that we don't have available now, but we probably will a year from now. So.
Yeah. So as I kind of wrap it up here, and we'll go over to questions in a few minutes. You know, one of the things we've learned is we need to be responsive to change. Like this, we've never thought that temporal dimension was critical before. We now know that it is important, and the people who utilize our data really do need that. We're all aware, you know, scholarship research is continuing to grow here. And there are new challenges, you know, open access, or shift away from, let's be real, it's a follow the money thing, right? People are moving from being focused solely on who's licensing and utilizing our content to where is that grant coming from? We need to track the impact of that grant that we gave. Let's track it all the way through the scholarship field, all the way to the output and the utility of that article or that research data set. We've moved to a more author-centric and researcher-centric workflows. We need to demonstrate compliance for funders, GDPR. We're seeing more questions being asked. A lot of our publisher clients want to know more about their authors. Where are they coming from? Research organizations are tracking output. So there are new challenges there. But one thing that we see all of the time is that, and we happily, our clients have stayed with us for a long time, so we have seen them go through tons of different migrations, okay? Migrate from one hosting vendor to another, migrate finance systems or fulfillment, CRMs. Oh, we're moving off our old spreadsheets and we're getting a CRM. Christine, let's talk about that. Association management systems like Personify and others. And so they want to move clean data and not lose history. You know, we all spend a lot of time and money and resources on those like beautiful software containers, but what makes them go is what you put into them, and that's clean, well-structured data. And let's face it, scholarship is a really long arc. You will, regardless of the role you and your organization are playing in scholarship and research, you're going to have touch points with Oxford University for the next 30 years, and think how many different places that data is going to live and how many more things you're going to want to know about them in that time. So again, we're staying flexible and adding new dimensions to our data, okay? And it's not going to be a very happy note. Well, it is a happy note. We don't know what's coming next. We have no idea, but it's okay. It's cool. It's fine. But we can be prepared anyway. Yeah,
we didn't know in 2003 what was coming next.
We had no idea. We didn't know it was coming in 2006 and 2003. So we really have never predicted the future. We've never predicted, 15 years ago, we didn't know we were going to be talking to the federal government of Portugal or these research organizations and funders. But, what we can say, and we really can't say what the next 15 years are going to bring, except for let's face it, we all know that we're going to become more data dependent. More data will proliferate at each stage of research. And so our data better be future proof. And because scholarship's here for the long game, and so are we. And the oldest existing, universities, University of Carouane in Fez, Morocco, founded in 859. University of Bologna followed in 1088, and they're still continually operating. So this is a really long arch. So despite all this seeming volatility, we're all around for the long term. So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague Diane, who's been gathering your questions as we go through, and we will attempt to answer them. We've got about 11 minutes left for questions. So thank you so much, everyone, for your energy. So Diane, do we have questions from the group?
We've had a few come in. Some we've just answered in text because they were details, but we have got one, about the slides, which I think you'll talk about. We will be circulating the slides.
Absolutely, yes. We're going to send a link out to everyone afterwards.
And then the next one, are you GDPR compliant? How does it affect us if we are using the identified database?
So Jay, do you want to talk to this, or I can?
Sure, I can certainly jump in. We are GDPR compliant, or we hope so. We've put an awful lot of time and energy into making the attempt, and we've certainly, our attorneys have assured us that we have made our best efforts to become GDPR compliant. We've in fact just updated our privacy policy on our website. That should be live now. If not now, then certainly this week. And it can be linked to from IDO, that's Identify Online for those that aren't customers. Or from our main website, ringgold.com. How does it affect us using Identify? Well, this is one of those areas where it's been a very complicated project for us, and to really understand the legislation and then become compliant and live up to what's expected of us. We have something of a buffer because we only work with institutions and we don't work with individual people's data. So from that standpoint, there's been less of a burden on us with respect to the types of data that we hold, because when we work with a large institutional subscriber to identify and we provide an audit of their subscriber database, there normally is not personal data held within their data or stored within Identify. So on some level, we skirt that rather completely. And our focus as an organization, as I'm sure many on this call have struggled with, what do we do now with GDPR? It's been from a marketing standpoint of who are we allowed to talk to and when. And we don't spam people anyway. In fact, we probably should send out more things. But it was another case where, well, we're not sending out blasts of emails, and so we can send out an opt-in for all of our non-customers. All of our customers have already said, yes, we'd like to receive notifications about your products and services for you. But it hasn't impacted necessarily how people are interacting with Identify directly.
With the database. But I do want to jump in for a second, Jay.
Yes,
so Jay mentioned that, as a data handler or data processor, I'm sorry, I don't always have all the terms down. I'll be compliant personally by May 25th. But what we do, as Jay mentioned, we do often process folks' data for audit, and that's kind of cleaning up their data against the Identify database. And the vast majority of the data that we handle, as Jay mentioned, is subscriber or customer or licensee or prospect records, right? Institutional licensees. However, we are seeing more and more folks who would like us to help sort out member affiliations of members, affiliations of authors and editors. So obviously, again, we can't tell you, oh, Joe Smith really is the editor of that. That's not where we sit. But as the records may be transmitted to us for the cleanup process, all we're going to do is kind of map the organization, normalize that affiliation and augment that data. We will be working with those kind of clients to make sure that no sensitive data is passed and that it's handled properly. So for the vast majority of what we do, it doesn't really come up. But as authors, editors, individual users, get more important, we will see an uptick in that kind of service that we provide for folks. But we will make sure that the data that they are transmitting to us will meet privacy, will meet our privacy policy and adhere to GDPR concerns.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Next question, we've got, what is the best and quickest way to subscribe to all the changes in the Ringgold database? Is it the Deltas file on FTP? Is that still the best way?
Well, for folks who do choose to license the full database outright, and folks can choose to just work with us on one-off or continuing projects where we're kind of doing the cleanup stuff, or they may utilize the whole database for internal purposes. For the length of their license with us, they get all the changes. We provide it in a couple of different ways. When you license the full database, you can use, we have a web interface, of course, nice and handy. A lot of clients use that. We also give you a full data feed, so you can pour the whole thing into a data warehouse, data lake, okay? Changes are delivered every week. We're constantly adding new organizations and making those changes, so you're always accessing the most updated version of the database. We also have some API calls, and of course that's calling to our current live database all the time. So yeah, if you're a client and you're working with us, changes are part of the package.
Okay. The next question, will Ringgold leverage, I think that might be cloud sourced, to gather institutional information to identify new organizations?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I think the short answer is no. And that's one of the things that Christine was talking about. One of the things that we've learned is over the last 15 years is how important the human component is, and not just the human component, but having people who are objective and professional to actually describe institutions from a third-party point of view. What we found is that first-person description of your own organization tends to be either inaccurate, honest mistakes get included, or there becomes a potential for trying to game the description of the organization in order to get a better result from your license, for example. And so, rather than now, there's a bit of a hedge on this answer in that we don't anticipate sending out or developing a facility to allow people to self-describe their own institutions. However, there's been some of our customers have asked for the ability to self-identify rather than have Ringgold audit or match their institutions to the Ringgold identifier, to allow them to do it themselves. And that is a capacity that we're developing. That's not crowdsourcing or cloud sourcing anything, but it does give folks an ability to identify a record that we already do have, or let us know if there's one that they think is missing, and we will go investigate.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to go on a limb and say the question may have been coming from the perspective of how do we find out about new organizations? How do we make sure that the people who choose to work with the database always have a complete set of clean master records for them? And that's the purpose. One of the main keys of the Identify database is so that the people who choose to work with us have a full and complete. You should always have like 100% coverage when you work with us. Now, how do we help you get there? You tell us. Hey, I just sold a license to, I'll make up my same organization again, the Christine Orr School of Cookie Baking outside Washington, D.C. And we realize, man, we don't have anything that looks like that. We better go check them out. So our clients kind of give us, say, the breadcrumb of saying, we think something exists, okay? Then we go out and independently research, and if it does, unlike that phony university we found at the top of the hour, if it does truly exist in the place the person kind of thinks it does, I think it's outside of Washington in this little town called Warrenton, Virginia. Somebody check that out. We will go investigate, research, and if it is true, we will then build up that whole big Ringgold style record. We'll join it to its hierarchies and its family tree, that kind of thing. So the how do new things get in there? It's not a crowdsource thing. It is proactive. It is reactive in response to what our customers and clients need. And we have a couple different pathways for how that happens on a mechanical side, but that's really it. They tell us, hey, this is a new organization for us, either for an author, a publisher, or this and that. And then we go out and do the independent research. And
a good indication for those that have been customers of Ringgold for a long time, a good indication that our coverage is very good and increasingly more complete. It's one of those you can never chase 100% all the way completeness, but the amount of records that we add to the database has been decreasing over time as on a very predictable arc, and that's good because it means that we are achieving that critical mass of institutions, and when much of the updates and changes and additions are either improvements to existing hierarchical structures or changes in the market. New organizations pop up or things change, or mergers or that kind of thing. So,
right. Well, are there any more questions? We've got 2 minutes.
We got just a couple more. One is, how often do you suggest we update our Identify database?
If I'm going to assume that's coming from a client, so I can respond to that client directly offline. But generally, we make the changes we push out the changes on a weekly basis for folks who are utilizing the full data feed, pulling it into a data warehouse. So depending on how, your application, I mean, the dream scenario is every week. Although we do have some folks that will go monthly because their churn is a little less, volatile. So it really depends on the application, but I will circle back with that client. We can talk.
Well, and I think it was a little more complicated before we, put out the Delta file or the difference file. Just the changes, it was a much bigger job just from moving a bunch of data around. It's a little easier now to do it more frequently.
Yeah, if you're using the database to, like I said, a lot of folks will use this and they'll plug it into their own system. They'll put it into the back of their CRM so that or their association management system, so that every time a new record is created or a new affiliation is created, it's clean, it's been ring-golded, right? If you're not making a lot of matches, if you're seeing holes, maybe that's, one way to maybe get at that would be, let's make sure we update more often and we're not missing anything. So a couple reasons to do it.
Okay,
And the only other thing I'd add to that is that if anybody that's using Identify Online know that the changes that are reflected in our production system are updated at the top of every hour. So it's super
so
current.
So the website, people who are looking at the website and people who are using the API to interact directly with our live copy are, of course, getting the most current data all the time. That answer was really for anyone who's importing the full database to like a data warehouse, that kind of scenario. And with that, were there any other hot questions? I do want to let people go on time, but was there anything else that was hot, Diane?
The only question that's left is, will you share the webinar recording later? And of course,
absolutely. Yes, we are going to share this link out. We're going to share the recording and the full slide deck. I've also put up on the screen here, we are giving another webinar in a week. And if this was interesting to you, we would love to have you attend next week. And we'll also be just coming up quickly at the SSP conference. Jay, myself, our CTO, Bill Haas, and also our colleague, Beth Hoskins, will all be at SSP. Beth and I are giving some sessions there. We also have a stand there for the week. So we would love to see you in person and chit chat. And we've also left our contact details. So if you wanted to discuss anything further, any concerns you have, clarifications, or if you want to receive kind of updates, news, and stuff from us, you can do so at info@ringgold.com. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for your time and attention. We're really honored that so many folks chose to spend part of the day with us. And we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks to everyone. Hope to see you at SSP. Bye.
Bye.